All right. Well, we are here. I am kind of really excited to be talking to Mr. Kurt Steinberg from Montserrat College of Art. The relationship between our organization and the school had, really started to blossom, especially as Kurt and I finally met each other. And had some discussions about what I did and what he did. And for me, the moment of realization that I saw such a strong relationship between what we do working with creative types and what you do is hearing your commencement speech about the creative life and, kind of just taking the whole industry by the horns and making it happen, and how important the creative industries are in general. Which that's the life I live. So to hear that coming from the president of the local art college was like, okay, I dig this. Real quickly, just to catch people up, how long have you been at the school now?
So on July 1st, it'll be 2 years. So just short of 2 years right now.
So in consolidated as a fashion as you can, catch us up on what those 2 years has been like for you pre-pandemic.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been a journey of trying to get to know the North Shore. I lived on the North Shore 25 years ago, and then my wife and I left, and so it was kind of coming back to a place that we spent a little bit of time and we're a little familiar with, but obviously a completely different landscape over a 25-year period. And so it was getting to know the place again, the people again, and understanding the Montserrat community a little bit more as well. So spent a lot of time doing that. And then also pushing some of the things that have always been my passion and trying to find like-minded people like yourself and others. And I'm a big collaborator, and so trying to find those people who are like-minded about partnerships, and I think trying to get other people who understand that creatives and creative people and industries are drivers of the economy and drivers of general life quality, and just trying to get that moving. So, I think pre-pandemic, I started to see that message really taking hold in a bunch of different places. We've got some really exciting new people in charge of the major cultural organizations up in the North Shore. And, I was pretty excited for the future of those discussions. Now, I see that what happened is more of a speed bump. And, I've been spending time not just trying to get our students through this, get our staff and faculty through this, but also spending some time connecting and maintaining those connections with people like Brian Kennedy and Oliver up at Cape Ann and those kinds of places, and really trying to make sure that we are queued up to continue the conversation as soon as we get to the other side of it.
Great. So one of the I'm not gonna say shining lights, but if everybody's using the analogy of light at the end of the tunnel, I feel like one of the lights right before the end of the tunnel is the need and necessity for people that are thinking outside the box, people that are thinking creatively. Every time I see any of these are the phases of reopening and this is what's going to happen, I'm like, oh, there's a space for an artist. There's a space for a musician. There's a space. So I feel like with people like you in the leadership position and organizations like mine, and really trying to get some of these other leaders to understand, that there are ways for us to really capitalize on how differently we all think about processes, and really trying to implement those people where we can. I mean, there's a lot of alumni from your school that are critically needed right now to help people pivot and think about new ways of doing things. And watching what you've done over the past 2 years with, embracing more of the digital space and embracing more of that, like that's kind of where we're going to be at for the next 12 to 18 months. So yes, it's hard, and yes, there's parts of it that's depressing, but I will say definitely what has gotten me to this point, and has me looking. I'm a pessimist. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a pessimist. It's just who I am as a person. But the little glimmers of hope that I see watching artisans and makers and all that stuff not only pivot their business, but pivot their business in a way that's helping humanity. Like that is just huge, and that's been really great to watch. And I know that there's some of like the makers that you've worked, that have come out of the school that are doing, artwork for awareness and creating great posters that are teaching people to stay 6 feet away from each other, and makers making masks, and it's been really inspiring to watch that piece of it. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about your current cohort of students, your future cohort of students, and figuring out where we can help them align with these businesses that typically think a little traditionally and need some help.
Yeah, I think what's been really surprising during this period of time is, well, I've already seen a pivot, and it sort of happened in two spaces. One is we were actually able to fill a number of internships that went online. So we even had businesses coming to us, and we also did some outreach where we were talking to businesses about, well, this is how we think this might work. You traditionally have one or two of our people, but here's the work product, here are the tools, here are the things they'll be able to do. And then we had businesses coming to us saying, like in graphic design or illustration or something of that nature, where, that can be from home. You scan it in, you send it in, you digitize it, you send it in. You have meetings just like we're talking right now. It doesn't mean the work stops. And then the other exciting thing is I've seen a number of our seniors actually continue to be hired for full-time jobs.
That's awesome.
Which is kind of, which is still amazing. We had one student who got hired in an animation studio out in California. We had another student locally get hired as a graphic designer at an apparel company.
Great.
Her last day of classes was May 6th, and she started work on May 7th. So,
nice. I mean, that's great. That's great.
So I really do actually see a lot of that change. I mean, what's amazing about the area in which we work in that creative space is that even though, as you said, there's traditional mindset about certain things, I think when push comes to shove, this section, this sector, it pivots pretty quickly, and just because innovations in our DNA, in our soul, right. And wanting to do something interesting and new is what drives us on a daily basis.
Right. So one of the things that has come up through this whole pandemic, and I'm curious about your feelings up to this point and also where it's going, is the discussion about the freelancers and the gig workers, which is a lot of what your alumni become, and how underrepresented, under-supported they were, and seeing what's come out with the pandemic unemployment and all of that kind of stuff. I was just curious, because again, that's a big part of what your alumni becomes. Is there somewhere you would like to see that go? And are you kind of satisfied that it's at least come to the table as part of a discussion?
Well, there's a couple of things that have been highlighted. I think that's one of them, which is, I think an awareness seems to be happening. I think Montserrat needs to be one of the groups that continues to pressure on that awareness and those conversations. We just got done with the part one of a Think Lab process with ECCF, which I was super excited about. In that, we started talking a little bit about that sector as well. And that is, I think that people are realizing what a pillar of the economy that group is, and that they are the engines in some of these businesses of their ability to move to the next level. The hardest part of some businesses is you always get to that point where scale or scaling up is a huge leap of faith, right? And that's when you either fall into the crevice or you make it to the other side
Right.
of the of the chasm, and the freelancers and the small business entrepreneurs are the ones that get those companies through that stuff. And I think there is definitely a recognition of that of that contribution. So
So
my
you're
hope is we continue to have that conversation. Yep. Sorry.
and no, 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 no. I was just going to say, I think you were going to answer it. Your overall response is you're hopeful.
Yeah, I'm pretty hopeful, honestly. I even see it, like I said before, in my answering one of the other questions, is that the just seeing the internship piece and the
Yep.
fact that they're willing to experiment with remote, and to see how it goes, I think is really really encouraging. And the fact that some of these businesses are hiring full time still, in a remote situation. I know we're talking about contract work right now,
Yep.
but I think all of that stuff follows that mindset, as companies. And I also see as companies start to ramp up again, and we hopefully loosen restrictions and start to get to the other side of this in a safe way,
Yep.
and path. That's good. Those are going to be, the freelancers and the contract workers are going to be the ones, I hope, that will be leading the charge in restarting everything, because you can commit to that before you can commit to bringing on full-time employees. And my feeling is they're hand in hand. There's I
Mm-hmm.
think a realization now that full-time employment and contract work are partners actually in the success of a company, and are in a lot of ways equally as important depending on where that company sits and where they are in their trajectory.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting from my end. We work with, I would say probably about 60% of our membership is freelancers and gig workers.
Yeah,
And it's been so, again, hopeful for me, because I don't really hear a lot of them saying, I give up, or I don't know. Instead of using the tone of, I don't know where I'm going to get work, it's more, I know I can get work if I just look at it a little differently. And like
yeah,
that little change in tone, I've seen the same thing. People getting hired, people getting work, people coming up with new plans and products, which is great. So just because I absolutely do not want Joe getting mad at me, and I'm going to say that in the interview because she's going to laugh at it, we're talking a lot about what happens with the kids when they get out. So let's talk about a little bit of these questions of when the kids are in school. You mentioned remote learning a little bit. How has the faculty, how have the students kind of adapted to that?
yeah. I
Is it working in your opinion?
I think the vast majority of it, I think, worked given the circumstances. There's certain things that you just can't do remotely, right? We benefited greatly from the standpoint that this happened in the middle of the semester.
Okay.
So if this had happened at the beginning of the semester, I think the difficulties would have been a little greater. Our ability to pivot in a week, which is what we did, would have been pretty difficult.
Yeah.
And that's because, when you do this, even though we kind of knew this, there are certain subjects, and because of the course content and the curriculum, are really hard to turn remote. So you're a printmaker. How many people have a 2-ton press
At home. Right.
sitting at home?
Right.
So
Right.
now, the good thing is they had time in the printmaking studio for half a semester. So it's not ideal, but they had their hands on the equipment. They knew the techniques. They had been going through that stuff. And then what the job was of the faculty member in partnership with the students was coming up with alternative printmaking methods at home, which people were able to do, which was really interesting.
That's great. Yeah.
And that's just an example. And then there are other courses, obviously, that are easier to move to that. I think, you sit there and say, well, liberal arts and art history were there. And yeah, so from a curriculum standpoint, easier to do. But our students, what I really found out, and not found out, what I had I guess, sort of proven again to me is that there's this aspect of college, right, which I think people forgot about. And you've seen some New York Times articles and other things bring it up.
Hmm.
There's an entire socialization aspect of
Right.
going to college that online does not facilitate.
Right.
So, we tried our best, but I think if there was one area of concern, is that moving forward, if we had to do this again, or if we had to continue it in any long term period, that aspect, missing just being with and being able to exchange in a live way with your colleagues,
Yeah.
was probably, and that's the thing we couldn't do anything about to some
Right.
extent. I mean, we did some fun. I called numbers for virtual bingo. We did that kind of stuff. But
Yeah. I kept loving seeing the screenshots of your like board meetings and committee meetings with everybody in costumes.
yeah,
Just to lighten it up a little bit.
we tried to have some fun. Yeah, staff meeting has a survey question, and we have a theme every
Great.
every week. And but because you got to laugh a little bit while you're going through all this stuff, and you got to try to keep it as light as possible, because what we're dealing with are really serious things.
Right.
It's not to get lost in that, but it's like you got to give people a mental break every so often. It's important.
Right.
I think I have been really, really impressed, ecstatic about the dedication, of our students, obviously, and their just fortitude to get through it, but also to learn and to keep learning and keep growing as artists as they go through that. But the faculty really came together. I have to tell you, we said we've got to do this, and they just stepped up and they just did it. There was no, it can't be done. I don't think I heard that once. And I give Ari in IT a big applause for the fact that she stepped up, and without really asking, she goes, okay, we're going remote. So we've got to have these info sessions, and they got to learn these programs, and this is how we're going to do it. And she came up with a whole continuing ed schedule for all of the faculty. So
it's amazing when you have somebody in that position. Like every time I talk to Paul, he's like, we're fine because we have Ari. We're good. We can pull off anything. We have this person. Like every single time I talk to him, the name comes up as this is why it's working.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's and that was great. I'd say one of the things that we found out too, that we were reminded of, and I talked about this in the think tank with ECCF earlier this week, is that if we have to go into this again in any percentage or shape, it may or may not happen. It also showed us the stark disparity between some student groups, for some of our students. And they weren't always economic. There was absolutely an economic driver in some of it, but some of it was geography.
Yeah.
They may have the economics, but they don't have access to the internet in the way that they need to, because they live in the middle of rural New York State.
Right.
And so they don't have the access to the bandwidth they need to do their animations or to do some of these media things that they have to do.
Right.
And then there's the economic piece where it's like they have access to computers because they're on our campus.
Right.
And they go home and they didn't have to think about it. But, the little tiny Chromebook doesn't work for us.
Right.
It doesn't have the ability to do what that student needs to do.
Right. You have somebody using.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Ari was able to, as much as possible, connect as many of our students to equipment. We were sending stuff out in the mail. We were doing all those kinds of things. We didn't cover everybody. We tried our best, but now we know where the gaps are. Ari kept track of that stuff. And my feeling is if we had to dive into it again, we'd still have some inequities, because I don't think you can completely eliminate those, but we're definitely, we'd be able to get as much of that equipment out as possible.
So what are you currently, the cohort that's there now?
Yeah.
You're sending out stuff and you're trying to do classes. How does this lead into a couple things? How does this lead into, what are your plans for the summer? Are summer classes still happening? And then also, is there a discussion and a plan for commencement? And that's been a big discussion in many colleges and high schools.
Yeah.
And so I guess, like, what is the path for some of these students right now?
Sure. So commencement, I'll start with that because it's actually the simpler of the things to discuss.
Yeah.
So the commencement, we made a commitment, early on to move it to September. We're going to have senior week. So basically we'll have the senior shows. Every wall space that we have on campus and then some is going to be given to the seniors to show off their stuff. We'll have gatherings, we're hoping, at some level, whatever we're allowed to do to celebrate that over the week. We have some other things that are in the planning stages. And then on the 12th of September is when we'll have the full-blown commencement at the Cabot Theater. So Casey and I have already talked about that. We're marked off for that day. And we're not going to skip on it. It's going to be exactly how we would have done it on May 15th. And then we're also worried about access, being able to have the students come back. So we're working on, how, if there's economic challenges for them to come back, what can we do? We established a student emergency fund that could potentially help with some of that stuff. That also has been able to help with some issues like I talked about earlier with regards to access to different things that we've already, used that money there, but we can also use it, I think, then as well. And then I know that we've got people that will house people who've already volunteered if we need to do that. It's about getting them here. And if they absolutely can't, my hope is to at least have a huge Zoom cast up on the stage so that they can see us and we can see them. I think that's to me, it's really important that it's a two-way interaction and not just them, dialing in so they can hear it. I mean, that's kind of, that doesn't work. So there's that piece. And then more immediate is that we did some tributes. I did a speech. Our Dean of Academic Affairs, Brian Pellinen, also recorded something. And then Maureen, our Dean of Students, read the names off as she traditionally does at commencement in front of the Hardy building. We recorded that. We're putting together a little package for what would have been commencement day on Friday. So
very nice.
That's what we've been doing with that. On the other piece, as far as the fall is concerned, we are looking at scenarios right now. I've got a number of committees working on different aspects of that. So we're looking at it really in three different ways. One is curriculum and how we're delivering the learning environments and what our limits are based on social levels of social distancing. And then we're looking at housing and support services because it's one thing and we're looking at that honestly across the board. Support services, not just for the students, but how do I support staff and faculty if we end up having to do this again? Because it's one thing to ask them to do it in an emergency situation and to kind of just get through it. But if we're knowingly going to be going into some version of this again at some point, we better have an apparatus to support people because it's to ask them to do it again is just in the same way is unfair. And I've recognized that with the community in meetings like this, for the last few weeks. So they know that I'm not just going to throw them in the middle of the desert and say, go find water, but they're going to do it.
Which
I think is super important.
There's a real psychological piece to this that you're one of the first people I'm hearing mention it. Like, it's one thing to get that first crap, we don't know what's happening, everybody locked down. Now you know what to expect when that happens, and that adds a whole nother level of like,
absolutely.
I'm very worried as somebody that works with a lot of small businesses. I'm very worried that they're going to be put in those positions again. And, is everybody going to make the right decisions when the time comes, when they know what to expect, what lockdown feels like, what, it's all very, very complicated.
And one of our big pushes at the end of the year was I talked to staff and I talked to faculty, and I was just being real with them. And I said, look, we've all been pushing for May 6th, which was the last day of classes. Be really self-aware of the fact that this emergency mode you've been in is going to come psychologically to an end because you won't be getting up the next day to support this group of students to do these tasks.
Right.
And that's when I think some of the stress that you've sort of cordoned off into a little closet of your mind may open the door and say, I'm here and you got to deal with me. It's going to pop up. So we were really pushing early on, our employee assistance program and also a couple of other resources we have, and just acknowledging the fact that, it's okay to basically not be okay once this is over with, and that the college is going to support you and make sure that you have the resources you need to kind of get yourself back together again. Because it's that's what's going on. And I think to me, that's what's been so special about the community is the caring that everybody has for each other. And you get a little bit of an affirmation of what you already knew going in when you get into something like this. And so if I grab a positive out of it, it's an affirmation of the fact that a place that I was attracted to originally 2 years ago is truly actually the place that I thought it was when I first came onto campus. So that's been really special and wonderful.
Good. So yeah, I think for me, and we've touched on it a few times, one of the things that I'm hoping that comes out of this as a positive is, all the people that you're referring to and most of the people that I work with had pretty full toolboxes. And I keep saying that we're just adding tools to the toolbox. We're not actually emptying the toolbox out. So when we come to the other side of this, hopefully not only the skill sets that you had in place, but the skill sets that you learned in this very volatile, unsure time, some of those things can be used to benefit you, and double dipping a little bit with having like, oh, I had this skill set, now I have this skill set. These can actually work in tandem. They don't have to be separate entities.
Yeah, what's amazing is that we got a little bit of that when I've talked to the faculty. So we had a number of what I would call just drop-in sessions with faculty at the end of the week. We had Ari put together a technology, support session every week on Fridays. And then right after that, they could come over and talk to Brian and I about whatever they wanted to talk about, or even just ignore us and talk to each other, which is totally fine too. And I just sat there and listened half the time to their exchanges. And the thing that sort of organically started to come up the first 2 times we did it was this acknowledgement across the board. There was no, I can't pick a group of people or disciplines, honestly, or even age group. It was across the board, where our oldest faculty in the fine arts was saying something similar to, our new animation adjunct, about the fact that they don't see the remote tools going away. In fact, they see an opportunity for enhancement for interacting with students and creating access. And not so much access in the sense of the classroom or replacing studio. That they acknowledge was lost a little bit. But the flexibility of being able to meet with students, and that they didn't have to be in, if the student missed office hours, it didn't mean that they get a hold of them, right? And so they're comfortable doing this, what we're doing now, and know that they can have meaningful interactions with people if it's done in the right way, in the right context. So I think that has been a real positive, that most people see it as an enhancement, actually, of their learning process, and they don't see giving up all the tools when they go back, in the fall to a more traditional learning delivery method.
Right. I definitely agree with the access piece. I know for me and for a lot of the people that I work with, all of a sudden there is access to all of these tools and all of these resources and actual humans that you may not have had access to before because schedules didn't allow for it. I've seen some some really, really impressive webinars and helpful things, and even some of like the funner stuff. Like everybody's obsessed with the Some Good News, the John Krasinski, like
Yep.
just stuff like that, where in the past we not that this situation has caused me to slow down in any way, shape, or form. I think like I feel busier,
Mm-hmm.
but it's busier being surrounded by stuff happening and information, and it's just been really cool. Like I know for me, it's given me more access to like what Mass Creative does and what other organizations do that I didn't necessarily have that kind of access.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like, okay, maybe I'll see you twice a year during the leadership committee. And all of a sudden now I'm getting weekly check-ins, and I'm starting to, okay, so now I know what you're working on, and you're making me really feel like my voice matters. And it's as easy as setting up an open office hour Zoom call with my state representative, and they actually have time to do that now, and because they're not at 500 events, and they're not like, so there's this, again, there's some things that have really it's given me some hope that there is not only room, but a huge necessity for the creative industries and that creative life that you talked about all along.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 quick things, and then we're gonna wrap this. I'm gonna talk more at length with Paul about Outrageous, but Outrageous is coming up, and you did not cancel it, and it is happening. So you give me your quick pitch of it, and then I'll get more details from Paul.
Sure. We're going online. I think it's definitely going to be an exciting event. Is it going to be the big party that everyone knows? No, it can't be. And so I don't think we're going to try to make it that, but I think it still is going to be exciting. I think there's still going to be a lot of energy associated with the event.
Mm-hmm.
What it is honestly a opportunity to support artists and to support creative people and to support Montserrat College of Art, who is trying to educate the next generation of those people. The incredibly important part of our economy that everyone is so protective of these days.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the reason why you want to come to it. At the end of the day, we're gonna make it fun. We're gonna make it interesting, but we need to do some fundraising, and we need to get some scholarship money for the next generation of creative people, and that's what this is all about. So we're going to do, and I'm sure Paul will go into it, but we'll have a silent auction is supposed to be going online on June 1st, and then on June 12th we're going to have the live auction. We've got a great auctioneer who's going to, I think, make it fun for us. We're going to do a couple of packages here and there to keep people interested in what's happening as we go through
Mm-hmm.
it. But I need people to show up, and I need people to bid. And if it's not the art that gets you motivated, which I hope it does, but it should also be the fact that you're helping out students who are trying to make their way through all this. And the atmosphere now, if I can't raise $1 now, it's going to be pretty.
Right.
It's a pretty. I don't know when we can in some cases,
Right. So this is more of a, I don't want to call it hypothetical, but kind of hypothetical, because we don't know. A lot of discussions have come up in we're in the face of crisis, we're in a pandemic, it's a world-shattering event, and pretty much over the history of man, after every earth-shattering event, there comes a renaissance. Do you see that? Do you feel that?
I am. I'm hopeful that if people take the lessons learned from this last few months and truly believe in those lessons, I think there's some improvement that can be made. I think, and what I mean by improvement sort of goes beyond anything we've been talking about. This is more of a personal reflection than anything else, and that is. I have personally been reminded of the importance of connection and the importance of acknowledging my fellow human and their struggle, and I'm reminded of the need of empathy in our daily lives. And I think that this process, I hope, has reinvigorated the understanding and need for empathy. And I emphasize that word because empathy is where understanding comes from. Empathy is where kindness and care come from. There are a lot of positive things that come out of that one piece. And by losing connection, as we have, and finding other ways to connect out of our desperation, I think reminds us that it is the root of who we are as people, that we need other people. I think we actually had slipped down a slope where a lot of us didn't think we needed other people. Right. And I think this reminded us that we absolutely do, that the hermit lifestyle is not for the majority of individuals that exist. And so I think the preciousness of all this, I hope, stays with us for a little while.
Yeah, for sure.
And shapes some of our decisions as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my mantra through all of this has kind of been, hopefully we can come up with empathy over ego, because I feel like ego gets in the way, and it had been getting in the way more and more. And so
I think so.
Yeah. So one final question, and this is probably the most important question I've asked you so far. In the face of where we're at right now, not a couple months ago, not in the future.
Right.
Why should somebody consider still going to Montserrat College of Art?
I think the number one thing is that we offer, I think, a bright and productive creative life and creative future. We give our students skills that are absolutely necessary for them to navigate that creative life and future. We offer an opportunity for someone who is driven by their own inner creative passions to focus those things in a disciplined and positive way. And we do it incredibly well, and we do it in a place that I think is full of caring and concern for every single community member. And I think there are, unfortunately, few places that can really say that with the kind of conviction that I can say it. And that, to me, is the future of the institution, and should be driving actually every decision we make moving forward, is to make sure that we're true to those principles as we make our way out of this and into sort of whatever the next stage of things is. I think that's incredibly important.
Great. I love that you did not have that question ahead of time, and that was so off the cuff and just perfect. So thank you for that.
All right. Awesome.
So thank you for coming on and having a discussion. I look forward to more. I know we're going to be a little part of Outrageous and help support it, because we try to support whatever y'all do. I've been photographing your commencement for years. I've got pictures in your guidebooks. We've, lots of collaborations over the years. And, one of my staff members is an alum, and we have about 8 to 10 members that are alums. So, we love the product. We love the people. We love everything that comes out of there. So we support that creative piece very much so. So looking forward to some stuff in the future. It was a pleasure having you on.
Yep.
At some point I'll see you in actual life.
Absolutely. Well, I think the great thing that we've got is we just finished our strategic plan, believe it or not. We just moved forward on that. and I'm looking forward to two things. We're going to make things, and we're going to break a bunch of stuff. And the revolution continues. And that is those are the three things, man. We're going to shake up the world, and we're going to make people think about some stuff. And that's
I appreciate it.
And that's what the college is about. And we're just going to keep going straight forward and just blow through every obstacle that we have in our way, which we've done for 50 years, and we'll continue to do it for 50 more. So
great. I appreciate
Thanks,
that.
John.
I appreciate you. I appreciate the school. And I'm going to end the recording now.
Got it.